The courtroom lingered in a heavy silence, the kind that seemed to absorb even the subtlest of sounds. A nervous cough, the rustle of a paper. It was a grand, imposing place, where decisions carved lives into paths unforeseen. Stately wooden benches lined with figures of all shapes and sizes under the cold fluorescent lights, illuminating faces bent under the grave weight of justice being served. Isaiah Thompson sat alone at the defendant's table, his small frame dwarfed by the imposing figures that surrounded him. Despite being just 14, his presence commanded a peculiar dignity. His clothes, worn and slightly oversized, spoke of an untold story marked with hardship and the kind of resilience that only necessity could forge. His eyes were restless, noting every creak and murmur of the courtroom while betraying nothing of the storm brewing beneath his calm facade. It was not by choice that Isaiah found himself here. A product of circumstance, his life had been a sequence of forced transitions, from foster care placements that never seemed to fit to temporary shelters dotted across town. Each new beginning bore the weights of multiple endings, as if he were piecing together a puzzle of which he only had half the parts. His heart drummed an anxious rhythm as the judge entered, clad in robes that bestowed the intimidating authority of the law. But to Isaiah, they meant something more profound and terrifying. What was her verdict? Would she see him as just another delinquent without a future? Or could she perceive the potential lying dormant beneath the rough exterior shaped by years of neglect? The prosecutor began to speak, their words forming an iron narrative around him. A theft born of hunger, a tapestry of minor offenses woven into one major accusation. Isaiah barely listened. He already knew the contours of this story, each recitation feeling like a ritual that told others who they thought he was, not who he knew himself to be. Nearby, the quiet presence of his court-appointed lawyer offered small comfort. An overworked public defender who wore the weariness of too many cases, too little time. A systemic problem turning human lives into case numbers devoid of nuance. Nevertheless, in their shared glances, Isaiah felt a sense of reluctant solidarity, a reminder that he was not entirely alone. The tension in the room was palpable. Each breath exhaled seemed to hang suspended, waiting. Despite himself, Isaiah's eyes flickered repeatedly towards the judge. There was something disarmingly familiar about Judge Miriam Blake that defied explanation. Her voice, commanding yet compassionate, almost like a melody he thought he had forgotten, sent ripples across the surface of his memory. For every session so far, Isaiah had stared hard, trying to place her within the fragments of his scattered recollections. As her gaze occasionally met his, an unspoken connection kindled, though both parties were unsure what it signified. To the judge, it might have been the brief recognition of a shared humanity with someone her job usually required her to remain emotionally distant from. But for Isaiah, it hinted at something far deeper. He allowed himself a moment to slip into the daydream of what it would mean if this mysterious bond meant more than mere familiarity, what it might be like to have a mother, a real mother, sitting up there. His heart begged for a loophole in his life's cruel game of odds, a chance encounter that might explain the inexplicable loneliness pulsing at his core. Then came the moment. The legal proceedings slowed, the public defender's voice droning, a subtle pause in the air. It was like stepping from a fevered state into the calm eye of a cyclone. Everything moved in a tranquil slow motion, the timbre in the room shifting from procedure to possibility. Isaiah stood, small but unyielding, his voice surprisingly steady as he addressed the bench. "You're my mom." In that instant, time seemed to crystallize. The acoustics sharpened, amplifying the collective gasp that echoed through the courtroom. It stretched the bounds of belief for the spectators, each grasping for their understanding of the unexpected confession, a statement neither provoked by the prosecution nor guided by the defense, but a raw truth from Isaiah's heart. Judge Miriam Blake stared in stunned silence, her gavel remaining still, the offstage moment when personal history collided with public duty. Her eyes locked onto Isaiah's, and in those seconds stretched into eternity, each person present was acutely aware of the rupture this declaration caused. Not just a disruption of the courtroom procedure, but the opening of a settled grave of buried secrets. Seeing the emotion flicker across the judge's face, Isaiah felt something long dormant unfurl within him. It was as though the floodgates of his heart had opened, letting a river of longing and hope finally rush through him. Here he dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, the life he had lived was preparing to transform, muscling its way past pain and regret into redemption. The silence that followed Isaiah's claim was profound, as though the air itself held its breath. Slowly, the courtroom began to breathe again. A murmur of voices, a cacophony of shifting bodies, and the distinct sharpness of papers ruffled by sudden motion. Isaiah took one last look around the room, then focused back on Miriam Blake, the woman who might just be more than just an arbiter of his fate. He knew, in the depths that mattered, something had irrevocably shifted. As the room buzzed with a new kind of energy, one steeped in the possibilities of rewritten futures, a sense of cautious hope unfurled in Isaiah's chest like a banner on the first day of spring. In the faces around him, jurors, clerks, strangers who had wandered in hoping for drama rather than law, the dawning realization of what had transpired was reflected back to him. Here was a child, lost in the machinery of justice, now standing on the tightrope of discovery, daring to stretch his arms wide and catch the wind of change. The courtroom lingered in a heavy silence, a solemn place where echoes of life-changing decisions were etched into its cold stone visage. Today, anticipatory tension vibrated through the hall, a dynamic energy tethered to the unseen forces shaping young destinies. Wooden benches, worn smooth by countless stories of despair and redemption, stood witness to another chapter beginning for Isaiah Thompson. Isaiah, a wiry 14-year-old, sat at the defendant's table as if it were a lifeboat amidst a turbulent sea. His presence was a jarring mix of defiance and despair, his dark eyes scanning nervously beneath a mop of unruly curls, betraying moments of vulnerability the stoic mask he wore tried to conceal. Life for Isaiah had never followed a steady path. The foster care system delivered him from one temporary home to another, each promising yet another short-lived illusion of stability and family. Isaiah learned early to pack light and love reluctantly, always prepared for the next move that would dismantle whatever sense of belonging he managed to cobble together. Despite the chaos, Isaiah nurtured his inner flame, a resilience that refused to be extinguished by the cold indifference of the system. But times grew tough and survival instincts kicked in. When a wave of unmet needs and unrelenting hunger collided, Isaiah found himself here, accused of theft, a brand itching to deepen the world's misconceptions about him. Today, in this courtroom, a stage of judgments and destinies, Isaiah was caught between self-preservation and an unknown yearning gnawing at him, like a melody he couldn't quite place. His focus wavered as he watched the woman who would soon pronounce his fate, Judge Miriam Blake, a figure of authority draped in black robes and wielding the power to nudge his life toward salvation or ruin. Isaiah felt an unfamiliar tug in his chest whenever he saw her, an inexplicable gravity that pulled him towards flickering memories of a gentler time, long before foster homes and lonely alleyways. He clung to these half-formed thoughts, suspecting they held the key to an unsolved riddle in his heart. The prosecutor's voice rose, slicing through the silence like a knife through taut fabric as they recounted the string of offenses that led Isaiah here. Petty perhaps to some, but each word laid bare the missteps of desperation that robbed Isaiah of childhood innocence and thrust him into a harsh adulthood too soon. Next to him, his overstretched public defender shuffled papers, their casework emblematic of a system straining under the weight of too many lives and injustices. Despite this, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared acknowledgement of the story that went beyond legal jargon, transcending the banal narratives of crime and punishment to explore shared humanity. As the hearing droned on, the disconnect between justice and truth grew ever more apparent to Isaiah. He realized that defining him solely by his mistakes grossly overlooked the complexity of his life, the tenacity lying in wait for someone, anyone, to unearth it beneath his bruised exterior. Isaiah's thoughts returned to Judge Blake, her poised attention and calm authority a startling contrast to the tumult roiling within him. There was something there, a familiarity that stirred something primordial in Isaiah's soul, something that whispered of home and the promise of answers locked away behind firm judicial resolve. In a state where time felt suspended, Isaiah listened not to the prosecutor or the defense, but to a voice within urging him to speak up and carve out a destiny not preordained by others. His mind wandered back to images of nighttime lullabies, of warmth and security that seemed tied to Judge Blake in some unfathomable way. It happened so quickly, the transition from thought to action, that even Isaiah felt as if he was an observer in his own unfolding drama. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tiled floor, a screech that halted even the prosecutor's monologue mid-sentence. The room shifted as all eyes turned to him, catching the flash of clarity on his face, a clarity that transcended his years and spoke directly to the heart of who he was and the journey that led him here. "You're my mom," he declared, his voice unwavering yet vulnerable, each syllable a plea for acknowledgement, for truth, for something beyond the judgments passed by others. Gasps peppered the courtroom's heavy air as disbelief rippled through the ranks of observers, a disbelief tinged with the possibility of the miraculous. Ears keen to the mundane details of judicial proceedings now drank eagerly from this unexpected well of emotional truth. Judge Miriam Blake, trained to steel herself against the personal lives intersecting with her professional duty, found herself suddenly, irrevocably moved. Isaiah's words cut through her practiced detachment, their power magnified by the heartbreaking hope that radiated from the young boy's eyes. In that moment of unexpected clarity, memories she had tried to bury years ago surfaced. The agonizing decision made when she was young and destitute, choosing to place her infant son into the system, believing it was the only way to secure him any future at all. She had often wondered where he was, what life he'd led. The pieces snapped into place with undeniable certainty now, joining hearts separated by time and hardship. The seconds that followed stretched and wavered. The courtroom balanced on the precipice of a new reality formed from Isaiah's courageous declaration. It wasn't merely a poignant interruption but a cathartic unmasking of buried longing, a journey towards healing long ignored in the silence of procedural justice. For Isaiah, those moments felt like crossing an unmarked threshold into an undiscovered land. A land where the weight of years gathered into a single moment of raw, unbridled emotion, where his words stitched a connection from his present to an altered future. He had not known this was the day everything could change, but he had grasped the possibility, threading hope into the fabric of his struggles. As murmurings resumed and the courtroom's pulse restarted, Isaiah fixed his gaze upon Judge Blake, seeing in her eyes a promise blurring boundaries between justice and redemption. In the unguarded warmth of her returning glance, he saw something reminiscent of his own journey, an invitation to begin anew, to rewrite the narrative that had defined the remnants of his young life. Isaiah allowed himself a tentative smile, emboldened by the silent understanding now hanging between them. The courtroom, once a place of judgment, transformed in that moment into a canvas where their shared story could begin to heal, offering a vision of a future laid bright before them. The air was thick with expectancy, each breath a testament to the myriad of stories and destinies that had converged within the courtroom's confines. Isaiah Thompson, small and wiry yet possessing the spirit of one who had seen the depths and refused to drown, sat at the defendant's table. The wooden bench felt like familiar territory now, a transient perch in a life defined by its impermanency. Foster homes had come and gone, each promising a semblance of family but delivering only ephemeral safety. Isaiah had learned to navigate this shifting landscape with the instincts of a survivor. Yet beneath the practiced nonchalance lay a heart longing fiercely for something more, something his young mind had never fully articulated until today. As the trial bobbed along its expected course, words filtered through to his consciousness, words of charges and defenses, of a life minutely dissected by strangers. Yet Isaiah's attention remained elsewhere, tethered to the judge presiding over his fate. Miriam Blake was dignified and commanding, a woman whose authority was apparent in every motion, every weighted glance. But what captured Isaiah was not her poise but an uncanny familiarity that stirred his deepest memories. Every look in her eyes, every inflection was a haunting echo of something he'd once known, an elusive piece of his past that danced at the edges of his understanding. Memories, hazy and half-formed, emerged from the depths of his subconscious. A lullaby murmured softly, the tender brush of warmth that promised safety amidst the unknown. Isaiah's heart beat a rhythm out of sync with the stilted bureaucratic language around him. Each beat spoke of a connection woven not through time, but through the indelible threads of shared existence. It was as though he stood beneath a long-forgotten night sky, deciphering constellations that reasserted his place amidst the chaos that had defined his early years. The prosecutor's voice drummed steadily onward, a relentless monologue dissecting the tales of theft and necessity that had branded Isaiah as a statistic. Yet to him, these were mere background music to the symphony of realizations composing within. The fragmented memories coalesced into a singular truth, rising from the ashes of doubt like a phoenix. He couldn't resist the pull any longer. The pressure of unsaid words swelled like a tidal wave, and he knew that if he didn't speak, he might drown in the silence. Standing abruptly, the suddenness of his motion rippling through the courtroom like an unexpected gust, Isaiah became the epicenter of all attention. The collective gaze of onlookers anchored him, and for a fleeting moment, his youthful heart grappled with the vulnerability of what he needed to declare. "You're my mom," he stated, his voice a potent mix of defiance and tenderness, each word a leap into the uncharted. The courtroom gasped, the sound more visceral than the clang of a dropped gavel, reverberating through the austere chamber like a musical note held in suspension. In that moment, Isaiah's bold pronouncement severed the mundane flow of judicial routine, replacing it with a narrative grounded in raw human truth, a truth so easily lost amidst legal banalities. Judge Miriam Blake sat still as stone, the practiced neutrality of her expression faltering under the weight of Isaiah's words. Her past rushed back with ruthless clarity, time-compacted memories rising to the surface. A young woman facing unbearable choices, the heartache of leaving her infant son to the chance winds of fate. The courtroom seemed to dissolve around her, and she saw not Isaiah, the defendant, but the child she had left years ago. His eyes mirrored her own, haunted yet hopeful, a fragment of her soul that had persisted despite the vagaries of so many passing years. For years, Miriam Blake had weathered her personal storm in silence, a lonely vigil of wondering and regret. She had often imagined this moment in her dreams, what she might say if ever she was faced with her son again. Now, as reality crystallized the impossible into something tangible, words eluded her, replaced by a rush of emotion so profound that it unraveled every carefully woven piece of judicial detachment. "Isaiah," she whispered, the name a soft balm in the storm of emotions encircling them. The name she had uttered to the stars each night, hoping beyond hope that he was somewhere living, breathing, existing. I always hoped I'd find you." The silence stretched taut, silence imbued with potential for healing, possibilities long deferred. The courtroom synergy shifted. No longer mere observers, the audience watched something transcendent unfolding before them, a reunion that transcended statute and law, invoking the sacred notion of family. Isaiah released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The fear that had tightened his chest gradually loosened its grip. In the raw, open vulnerability, he saw not the judge presiding over his future, but the mother irrevocably tied to his past, present, and future. A mother now stepping forward, closing the gulf time and circumstance had placed between them. For both, the heaviness of loss slowly began to dissipate, making room for something new, a hopeful beginning filled with tentative steps towards mutual understanding. Isaiah felt an unfamiliar warmth unfurl within him, the first colors of an emotional sunrise after so many nights shrouded in darkness. "So it's true," he murmured, awe threading through his voice. Relief mingling with disbelief in equal measure. He reached out, not just physically but emotionally, soul seeking for its counterpart. This acknowledgement, born of instinctive recognition, irreversibly altered their lives' trajectory. Judge Blake rose from her seat, her judicial poise forgotten, replaced by the uncontainable pull of a heart reuniting with what had been lost. There were formalities to address, processes to navigate, but in that moment, only one truth reigned supreme: they had found each other. In the heart of the courtroom, justice found expression in its purest form, not in the judgments handed down but in reconciliation and the reweaving of threads that once seemed permanently severed. Together, in the stunned silence peppered now with the tears and smiles of those witnessing this unanticipated miracle, mother and son stepped slowly, yet confidently into a new story. One authored by love and the unyielding strength not just to survive, but to truly live. In the stunned silence that followed Isaiah's unexpected announcement, Judge Miriam Blake's mind whirled as if caught in a tempest of emotions and memories. For a moment, the courtroom's rigid walls seemed to blur and recede, leaving her adrift in a bewildering sea of recollections. Years earlier, Miriam had made the most agonizing decision of her life, a choice forged in desperation, fear, and an overwhelming love that had driven her to give her newborn son a chance at a better future. But in relinquishing Isaiah, she had also relinquished a piece of her soul, forever haunted by what-ifs and near-paralyzing guilt. Her vision flickered to the present, where Isaiah stood. His eyes locked on hers, a living, breathing connection to her past that she had long thought severed. His eyes were mirrors, reflecting back her own pain, her own resolve, the echo of a life she had yearned to know. It was as if he carried within him the very essence of her spirit, distilled into the unguarded gaze of a child yearning for answers. "Isaiah," she murmured, her voice trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. It was both a question and a declaration, a single name suffused with a hope that had never fully abandoned her. Over the years, his name had been her solace and torment, whispered to the void of an indifferent night, a prayer cast into the uncertain winds. Across the courtroom, Isaiah's heart pounded against his ribcage. The courtroom's atmosphere had transformed. A place once cold and indifferent now pulsed with a nascent warmth he had never known. Her acknowledgement was a beacon in the fog of his uncertainty, illuminating paths of his identity he had never dared to traverse. His instincts had not betrayed him. Somehow he had known, deep in his marrow, that this woman was tied to him through the invisible threads of family. A woman who now stood before him, no longer a distant arbiter of fate but a reconnecting lifeline. Miriam descended the bench slowly, each step an eternity as she moved towards Isaiah. Legalities and protocol momentarily set aside, she was simply a mother reclaiming her son. Her robes, which had once shielded her emotions, now felt like a shroud she longed to shed. As she reached him, her hands, tentative and trembling, extended towards the son she feared she'd never hold again. Both of them stood suspended on the precipice of a new beginning, the chasm of lost time a whisper between them. Isaiah met her halfway, needing no further proof, no more assurances. With his heart laid bare, he closed the distance that had defined his life for too long. When they embraced, it was an act imbued with a million unsaid apologies and assurances, a communion between two souls finding solace. Around them, the courtroom's inhabitants watched in reverent silence. The prosecutor, the defense lawyer, the jury, all transformed into steadfast witnesses to a drama far more profound than the theft that had brought Isaiah here. The courtroom became a stage for redemption, where justice transcended its conventional contours to embrace the redemptive power of human connection. Miriam pulled back slightly, her hands cradling his face, as if ensuring he was real, that this moment was tangible. The tears that spilled down her cheeks carried away years of regret and longing, distilling them into gratitude for the second chance they had been granted. "I never stopped thinking about you, Isaiah," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "Every day I wondered where you were, what kind of person you'd become. If you'd hate me for what I did." Isaiah, with a resilience born of his experiences, absorbed her words, understanding the fear and love that underscored them. "No," he whispered in response, shaking his head gently. "I understand now. You did it for me. And I've found you, that's what really matters." Between them, the air hummed with the promise of an uncharted future. It was neither perfect nor easy, but it was theirs. A future where they would learn to navigate the unfamiliar landscape of their relationship, buoyed by the sheer force of their newfound connection. Their shared moment was both culmination and commencement, a poignant blend of ending one chapter and embarking on another. Though the specter of their past choices loomed over them, the embrace of forgiveness and acceptance loomed larger. All at once, those gathered understood that this was more than just a private reunion. It was a testament to resilience, a reminder of the relentless human capacity to overcome adversity and reclaim what was lost. Theirs was a story that extended beyond the courtroom, echoing themes of justice, redemption, and the undying thirst for belonging. As Miriam led Isaiah from the courtroom, the quiet strength in her demeanor reminded all present of what true justice looked like. An act not confined to the harsh pronouncements of the legal system but one found in the quiet moments of human connection, the places where forgiveness and hope coalesce to transcend past wrongs. Together, mother and son stepped into the light of a world changed not only by the revelation of the day but by the indomitable spirit with which they pursued their new beginning. Their path ahead was unwritten, full of obstacles and moments of healing, but filled with the potent promise of shared love, the very foundation upon which they would rebuild their lives. In the stunned silence that followed Isaiah's unexpected announcement, Judge Miriam Blake's mind whirled as if caught in a tempest of emotions and memories. For a moment, the courtroom's rigid walls seemed to blur and recede, leaving her adrift in a bewildering sea of recollections. Years earlier, Miriam had made the most agonizing decision of her life, a choice forged in desperation, fear, and an overwhelming love that had driven her to give her newborn son a chance at a better future. But in relinquishing Isaiah, she had also relinquished a piece of her soul, forever haunted by what-ifs and near-paralyzing guilt. Her vision flickered to the present, where Isaiah stood. His eyes locked on hers, a living, breathing connection to her past that she had long thought severed. His eyes were mirrors, reflecting back her own pain, her own resolve, the echo of a life she had yearned to know. It was as if he carried within him the very essence of her spirit, distilled into the unguarded gaze of a child yearning for answers. "Isaiah," she murmured, her voice trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. It was both a question and a declaration, a single name suffused with a hope that had never fully abandoned her. Over the years, his name had been her solace and torment, whispered to the void of an indifferent night, a prayer cast into the uncertain winds. Across the courtroom, Isaiah's heart pounded against his ribcage. The courtroom's atmosphere had transformed. A place once cold and indifferent now pulsed with a nascent warmth he had never known. Her acknowledgement was a beacon in the fog of his uncertainty, illuminating paths of his identity he had never dared to traverse. His instincts had not betrayed him. Somehow he had known, deep in his marrow, that this woman was tied to him through the invisible threads of family. A woman who now stood before him, no longer a distant arbiter of fate but a reconnecting lifeline. Miriam descended the bench slowly, each step an eternity as she moved towards Isaiah. Legalities and protocol momentarily set aside, she was simply a mother reclaiming her son. Her robes, which had once shielded her emotions, now felt like a shroud she longed to shed. As she reached him, her hands, tentative and trembling, extended towards the son she feared she'd never hold again. Both of them stood suspended on the precipice of a new beginning, the chasm of lost time a whisper between them. Isaiah met her halfway, needing no further proof, no more assurances. With his heart laid bare, he closed the distance that had defined his life for too long. When they embraced, it was an act imbued with a million unsaid apologies and assurances, a communion between two souls finding solace. Around them, the courtroom's inhabitants watched in reverent silence. The prosecutor, the defense lawyer, the jury, all transformed into steadfast witnesses to a drama far more profound than the theft that had brought Isaiah here. The courtroom became a stage for redemption, where justice transcended its conventional contours to embrace the redemptive power of human connection. Miriam pulled back slightly, her hands cradling his face, as if ensuring he was real, that this moment was tangible. The tears that spilled down her cheeks carried away years of regret and longing, distilling them into gratitude for the second chance they had been granted. "I never stopped thinking about you, Isaiah," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "Every day I wondered where you were, what kind of person you'd become. If you'd hate me for what I did." Isaiah, with a resilience born of his experiences, absorbed her words, understanding the fear and love that underscored them. "No," he whispered in response, shaking his head gently. "I understand now. You did it for me. And I've found you, that's what really matters." Between them, The air hummed with the promise of an uncharted future. It was neither perfect nor easy, but it was theirs. A future where they would learn to navigate the unfamiliar landscape of their relationship, buoyed by the sheer force of their newfound connection. Their shared moment was both culmination and commencement, a poignant blend of ending one chapter and embarking on another. Though the specter of their past choices loomed over them, the embrace of forgiveness and acceptance loomed larger. In that embrace, the courtroom, a place of solemn justice, transformed into a cocoon of rediscovery and healing. Each spectator became a silent participant in their story, moved by the raw, poignant unraveling of human emotion. It was an affirmation that sometimes, love finds a way to transcend mistakes, to bend the arc of destiny towards reunion and redemption. The prosecutor cleared his throat, stepping forward carefully. "Your Honor, I mean Miriam," he began, awkwardly trying to find his footing in this unprecedented situation. Perhaps we should consider an adjournment or a private discussion to arrange things properly." Miriam nodded, understanding both the necessity of due process and the urgency of personal matters demanding her attention. "Yes, let's do that," she agreed, her voice gathering its judicial poise once more. But the warmth remained, a palpable energy radiating through the room. With procedures momentarily paused, Miriam led Isaiah out of the courtroom, their hands still clasped together like a lifeline they had finally found. As they exited, the courtroom erupted in quiet murmurs, a testament to a shared witnessing of something both profound and hopeful. In the corridors of the courthouse, away from the formality and constraints of the law, Miriam allowed herself to envision a future, one marked by possibilities rather than regrets. Isaiah walked beside her, the slight weight of his presence a constant reminder of their new reality. He was a boy and also a young man, a child displaced yet now home. "Miriam," a voice called from behind. It was the defense lawyer, a kind-eyed man who had silently rooted for the boy from the start. "Just wanted to say, it's heartening to see moments like this. It's rare, but it reminds us of what's truly important." She smiled, a brief, genuine display that felt like the first in years. "Thank you," she replied, understanding that gratitude extended beyond words, encompassing a promise to move forward with strength and purpose. Isaiah glanced at his mother, considering his next words carefully. "We have a lot to talk about, don't we?" he asked, his tone a delicate blend of trepidation and eagerness. "Yes, we do, Isaiah. A lifetime's worth," Miriam agreed, her voice gentle as she led him down the corridor, away from the past, into the light of new beginnings. Together, mother and son stepped into the world beyond the courtroom. It was bright and daunting, filled with challenges that loomed like shadows around their shared path. But their love, newly found and fiercely won, would serve as a guiding light, a beacon of hope and resilience. As they walked out into the sunlight, the weight of history settled into a manageable piece of their collective journey. It whispered of trials past but also sang of victories yet to come, promises that would carry them forward, hand in hand. The afternoon sun bathed the courthouse steps in a gentle golden glow, as if nature itself was participating in the rebirth of a connection thought lost. Miriam Blake stepped out into this light holding the young hand that promised uncharted paths and second chances. Isaiah, at her side, surveyed his surroundings with a mixture of awe and trepidation. For him, everything felt new, buzzing with the unspoken potential of hope that had seemed foolish to wish for, just hours before. As the courthouse doors swung shut behind them, a burden appeared to lift from Miriam's shoulders. Her judicial robes, once authoritative and unyielding, now seemed almost ceremonial, symbols of a past life that no longer defined her sole identity. Today, she had stepped down from those lofty benches, crossing the invisible line that separated her roles in life, judge, mother, and into a personal reality where she intended to reconcile the two. Isaiah, too, seemed to have shed an invisible weight. The court's cold judgment had been supplanted by an embrace most sincere. It was as if he had finally found the missing piece that had eluded him in the chaotic puzzle of foster homes and forgotten promises, a truth that tied his existence not to fleeting guardians but to his origin, his essence, his family. They paused for a moment on those steps, savoring the present. Miriam turned to Isaiah, observing the tender vulnerability still present in his eyes amid the nascent strength. "Are you okay, Isaiah?" she asked, her voice a soothing balm covering years of neglect. "I think so," he replied, almost whispering, as if too loud a voice might shatter the fragile harmony they had found. "A lot. But I feel good." He stumbled over the words, his usual bravado replaced by a surprising honesty. "In time you'll get used to this," Miriam assured, wrapping an arm around his slender shoulders, offering both warmth and reassurance. "We'll build something, Isaiah. Together. One step at a time." The air buzzed with new energy, the world outside unfurling with challenges Miriam had once only dreamt of confronting alongside her son. Beside them, landscape photographers, family groups, and hurried pedestrians created a tapestry of normality around their extraordinary moment, a reminder that while life continues its relentless march, so too does opportunity for change. Isaiah tilted his head towards his mother, questions forming like raindrops on a distant horizon. "Mom," he tested the word, still foreign but filled with promise. "What happens now? Do I still have to worry about the court stuff?" The gravity of his circumstances once darkened every future projection he dared envision. Miriam paused, ensuring she met his gaze fully, a connection affirming that his fears, like his hopes, were valid. "We'll have to follow some of the process, yes. There's clearing up to do with the legal side," she explained, mindful of not overwhelming him. "But my job is also to ensure we keep moving forward, that I take care of those fears as much as the system will allow. You're my son, and with that comes a commitment stronger than any judgment." Her look spoke of unyielding support, infusing Isaiah with the courage he'd so often conjured alone. The paradigm of his life, once mired in doubt, began tilting towards bright vistas he had long considered unreachable. A gentle breeze swept past, carrying with it the sounds of the bustling city, life in perpetuity, filling their silence with an invitation to join the rhythm of hope and change. Miriam pulled her son closer, not out of fear of losing him again but to emphasize that together, they would face the unknown and forge their shared destiny. "Are you hungry?" she asked, a smile tugging at her lips. "I think it's long past time we broke bread together. Properly. Start with something easy like pizza." Isaiah's eyes lit up with a brilliant mix of relief and anticipation. Everyday occurrences had become significant milestones he yearned to traverse. "Yeah, I'd like that," he said, managing a grin that felt genuine, an expression seldom worn but instantly liberating. And so, mother and son threaded their way through the streets, negotiating the typical clamor of honking horns and hurried conversations, a city landscape that reclaimed them with familiarity despite this newfound anomaly of family. It was in this bustling environment that their journey, once fraught with despair, transformed into an embrace of possibilities. Finding a small, bustling pizzeria not far from the courthouse steps, they entered to the welcoming aroma of basil and freshly baked dough, a sensory resuscitation that whispered of home. Miriam ordered their meal, seeking out the warmth in Isaiah's reactions, tracing each glance and smile with hope that anchored them both. As they sat at a quiet table, plates between them, each flavorful bite they shared filled more than just an empty stomach but a void of understanding, slowly filling years of untold stories and compassion unexpressed. Isaiah spoke of moments from his past life, his voice weaving through anecdotes of bravery masked as recklessness, narratives partially colored by hardship yet edged with remarkable resilience. Miriam listened intently, her heart swelling with pride and sorrow. Each tale confirmed what she had both feared and hoped. Isaiah's spirit remained unbroken despite the trials faced alone. In turn, she shared fragments of her life, sketching the decisions that had shaped her world in his absence, the fears, triumphs, and love that had sculpted her journey. Their conversation became a bridge, a testament to the human capacity for understanding and rediscovery, mirroring the unfolding potential binding them in an extraordinary tapestry of what could still be. As dusk descended like a velvet shroud, stars peppered the cobalt sky in scattered pinpoints, guiding their steps back through the streets, hand in hand. Isaiah felt within him not the heavy coil of what had been but a lighter thread of what would endure, an indelible mark of love's rediscovery conspiring with the universe to craft a future enviously bright. Finally, as they approached a turn leading towards the promise of shelter and belonging, Miriam's voice floated softly between them. "We're a family, Isaiah, and that's where our journey truly begins. Whatever else happens, we'll confront it together." His response came as an echo of unspoken dreams now shimmering into reality. Together, he affirmed, thankful for the stars aligning in their favor. Their steps, rhythmic and unhurried, carried them forward, a mother and son rediscovering one another, embarked upon a journey fortified by their reunion with love's profound, forgiving grace. And in that resplendent union, they found a source of infinite resilience, the belated yet timeless power of their own undeniable bond.